Hi and welcome to Apex Atlas. Before cities, before roads, before history was written down, there was land. Not young land shaped by recent upheaval, but ancient ground, worn, patient, and enduring. This is Australia, a place where the rocks beneath your feet are older than most life on Earth, where deserts breathe, forests burn to survive, and animals evolved along paths found nowhere else. A continent shaped not by speed or violence, but by time itself. Australia is often called a country, but in truth, it is something far larger. A continent of extremes. From coral seas to scorched interiors, from tropical rainforests to alpine snowfields, from ancient deserts to living reefs. This land tells a story measured not in centuries, but in billions of years. In this documentary, we explore the complete natural identity of Australia, how it formed, how it lives, how it burns, floods, adapts, and survives. This is the story of Earth itself, told through one of its oldest landscapes, the oldest land on Earth. To understand Australia, you must begin far beyond human memory. More than 3 billion years ago, long before dinosaurs, forests, or even complex life, the foundations of Australia were already forming. The continent sits on one of the oldest pieces of Earth's crust still exposed today, a stable core known as a craton. While other continents were shattered, folded, and rebuilt by violent tectonic collisions, Australia remained unusually calm. It drifted. It eroded. It aged. For hundreds of millions of years. Mountains rose here and slowly vanished again, ground down by wind, rain, and time. This is why Australia has no towering young ranges like the Himalayas or Andes. Its mountains are old, rounded, and worn, the bones of landscapes that once stood far higher than today. As the supercontinent Gondwana broke apart, Australia separated from Antarctica and began drifting northward, carrying its ancient soils into warmer latitudes. That slow journey changed everything. As climates warmed and rainfall declined, nutrients were gradually leached from the land. Australia's soils became some of the poorest on Earth, forcing plants and animals to adapt in extraordinary ways. Nothing here could afford waste. Plants evolved tough leaves, deep roots, and fire resistance. Animals adapted to scarcity, heat, and isolation. Life did not compete aggressively, it endured. Volcanoes once dotted the eastern edge of the continent, leaving behind fertile pockets of basalt soil. These small regions would later support forests, farming, and human settlement, standing in sharp contrast to the vast arid interior. Yet despite its apparent stillness, Australia is not lifeless. Its stability allowed ecosystems to evolve slowly and independently, cut off from the rest of the world for tens of millions of years. When marsupials disappeared elsewhere, they flourished here. When placental mammals dominated other continents, Australia followed a different evolutionary path entirely. The land itself shaped this outcome. An old continent produces old rules. Rules where survival depends on patience, efficiency, and adaptation, not speed or strength. Even today, Australia continues to drift northward by a few centimeters each year, a reminder that the story is still unfolding. The oldest land on Earth is not frozen in time. It is alive, changing slowly, carrying the memory of a planet far older than us. And everything that follows: the deserts, the forests, the forests, the creatures, all of it begins here. A continent of extremes. To stand anywhere in Australia is to feel the influence of climate. Not a single climate, but many, layered across a continent so vast that entire weather systems are born, travel, and die within it. Australia is often imagined as uniformly hot and dry. Yet this is only part of the truth. In the far north, seasons are ruled not by temperature, but by rain. Here, tropical air masses surge south from the equator, bringing monsoonal downpours that transform dusty plains into shallow inland seas. Rivers that remain dry for years suddenly burst into life, flooding wetlands and triggering explosions of plant growth, insects, and birds. In contrast, the heart of the continent lives under a different rhythm. Central Australia sits beneath descending dry air, where clouds struggle to form and rainfall is unpredictable. Some places may wait years for meaningful rain, only to receive it all in a single violent storm. This imbalance defines the land. Australia is the driest inhabited continent on Earth. Yet when rain does arrive, it often arrives in excess. Along the eastern edge, the Great Dividing Range intercepts moist ocean air, forcing it upward and squeezing out rainfall. This narrow strip supports forests, rivers, and much of the country's agriculture. While just beyond the mountains, the land quickly fades back into dryness. To the south, temperate climates bring cooler winters and milder summers. Snow falls on the Australian Alps each year, a fact that surprises many who picture the continent as permanently sun-scorched. But it is not temperature alone that defines Australia's extremes. It is variability. One year may bring drought so severe that rivers shrink into chains of isolated pools. The next may unleash flooding so widespread it can be seen from space. At the heart of this instability lie powerful climate drivers. The most influential is El Niño. When ocean temperatures rise in the Pacific, rainfall shifts away from Australia. Drought tightens its grip. Heat waves intensify, and the risk of bushfires rises sharply. Its counterpart, La Niña, reverses the pattern. Cooler ocean waters push moisture back toward the continent, bringing prolonged rain, flooding rivers, and saturated soils. Entire ecosystems respond, bursting into life almost overnight. Australia swings between these two states again and again, never settling for long. Heat is another defining force. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 40 degrees Celsius across vast regions. In the interior, the ground itself radiates heat, creating hostile conditions where survival depends on timing, shelter, and efficiency. Animals become nocturnal. Plants close their pores to conserve moisture. Life retreats underground or into shade. Fire, too, is inseparable from climate. Dry heat, strong winds, and flammable vegetation create ideal conditions for bushfires. But in Australia, fire is not simply destruction. Many plants rely on it. Some seeds will only germinate after exposure to intense heat. Others depend on smoke to trigger growth. Fire clears old vegetation, recycles nutrients, and reshapes the landscape. Yet as climate patterns intensify, fires grow hotter, larger, and harder to control, pushing ecosystems beyond the limits they evolved to withstand. Cyclones batter the northern coastline. Dust storms sweep across the interior. Marine heat waves bleach coral reefs offshore. Australia does not experience these events occasionally. They are part of its natural rhythm. This is a continent defined not by balance, but by fluctuation. A land where survival depends on flexibility, where life has learned to endure both abundance and scarcity, often within the same decade. In Australia, climate is not background noise. It is the driving force. It determines where forests grow, where rivers flow, where animals migrate, and where humans can live. To understand this continent, you must accept its extremes, because stability is the exception, not the rule. The Red Heart, deserts and the outback. At the center of Australia lies a vastness few truly understand. This is the outback, a region defined not by emptiness, but by scale. Here, distances stretch beyond the horizon. Roads disappear into heat haze. The land seems still. Yet nothing here is inactive. Australia's deserts cover nearly 70% of the continent, making this one of the most arid landscapes on Earth. But these are not lifeless wastelands. They are living systems, finely tuned to scarcity. The Simpson Desert rises and falls in endless parallel dunes, its red sands sculpted by wind over thousands of years. To the west, the Great Victoria Desert spreads even wider, a mosaic of spinifex grass, salt lakes, and stony plains. Further north, the Tanami and Gibson deserts blur into one another, their boundaries defined more by rainfall than geography. Rain is rare, but it is never irrelevant. When storms arrive, the transformation is immediate. Dry creek beds flood within hours. Seeds that have waited years burst into life. Wildflowers blanket the desert floor in color so vivid, it seems impossible against the surrounding red earth. Animals emerge just as quickly. Reptiles warm themselves on newly heated ground. Birds arrive from hundreds of kilometers away. Mammals surface from burrows, taking advantage of a brief window of abundance. Much of desert life here is invisible by day. Heat forces survival underground. Nocturnal creatures rule the outback after sunset, hunting, feeding, and moving while temperatures fall. Every action is measured, every movement economical. Water is the currency of survival. Permanent surface water is rare, but beneath the continent lies a hidden lifeline, the Great Artesian Basin. This vast underground reservoir feeds springs and waterholes, some of which have sustained life for tens of thousands of years. These isolated oases become gathering points, supporting plants, animals, and people alike. Rising from the desert plains are landmarks that feel timeless. Uluru stands alone, its surface shifting color with the sun. deep red at dawn, glowing orange at dusk, and almost purple beneath storm clouds. Nearby, the domes of Carter Tutor rise like stone waves, their valleys funneling wind and water through an otherwise dry land. These formations are not just geological features. They are living places, deeply connected to the cultural and spiritual identity of the land. Fire moves differently here than in forests. It travels low and fast through grasses, clearing old growth without destroying roots. Many desert plants depend on these cycles, regenerating stronger after each burn. Yet even fire must respect the desert's limits. Too much heat, too often, and the balance begins to fracture. Despite its reputation for harshness, the outback is astonishingly resilient. Life here has evolved not to resist extremes, but to expect them, to wait patiently, to act quickly, to disappear when conditions turn hostile. This is a land that does not reward haste. It demands understanding. The red heart of Australia beats slowly, but it has endured for millions of years, outlasting ice ages, climate shifts, and rising seas. And it remains vast and powerful, at the center of the continent. Mountains, plateaus, and the Great Dividing Range. Across much of Australia, the land lies low and open, but along the continent's eastern edge, the surface begins to rise. Not sharply, not violently, but gradually, as it has for hundreds of millions of years. This is the Great Dividing Range, stretching over 3,000 kilometers from tropical Queensland to the temperate south of Victoria. It is Australia's most extensive highland system. Yet despite its length, it is not a single mountain chain. It is a complex landscape of plateaus, escarpments, ridges, and worn peaks. The remnants of mountains that once stood far higher than anything seen today. These highlands formed long before Australia became isolated. They were uplifted, fractured, and reshaped during ancient tectonic events, then slowly eroded by wind and water as the continent drifted northward. What remains is a landscape softened by time. Rounded summits, deep valleys, sheer sandstone cliffs carved by rivers that have flowed here for millions of years. In places like the Blue Mountains, vast escarpments drop away suddenly, revealing layered rock faces that record the slow passage of geological time. These cliffs act as natural barriers, trapping moisture on their coastal side and shaping the ecosystems that cling to their edges. Further south, the land rises into the Australian Alps. Here, conditions change dramatically. Temperatures fall. Snow blankets the peaks each winter. Rivers are born from melting snowfields, flowing outward to feed faraway plains and farmlands. At the highest point stands Mount Kosciuszko, modest in height by global standards, yet critical to Australia's water systems. From these alpine regions, some of the country's most important rivers begin their long journeys, carving paths through valleys and across lowlands, before eventually reaching the sea, or vanishing into dry inland basins. Beyond the main spine of the Great Dividing Range, plateaus stretch westward. These elevated tablelands form transition zones, neither coastal forest nor true desert. They host grasslands, woodlands, and fertile soils that have long attracted both wildlife and human settlement. Volcanic activity once reshaped parts of this region, leaving behind basalt plains rich in nutrients. These pockets of fertile land stand out sharply against the generally poor soils of the continent, supporting forests, farms, and dense biodiversity. Despite their age, these mountains continue to influence life across Australia. They steer weather systems. They capture rainfall. They divide rivers flowing east to the ocean from those that drift slowly inland. Without them, Australia would be far drier than it already is. Yet these landscapes are fragile because the mountains are old. Their soils are thin. Erosion happens easily. Recovery is slow. Fire, drought, and heavy rain can reshape entire valleys within a single season. Still, life persists. Eucalypt forests cling to ridgelines. Alpine plants survive short summers and long winters. Animals adapt to cooler temperatures and seasonal change, forming ecosystems found nowhere else on the continent. Australia's mountains do not dominate the skyline. They do not overwhelm with height or drama. Instead, they define the land quietly, guiding water, climate, and life itself. They are not monuments to power, but to endurance, and in a continent shaped more by time than force. That endurance is everything. Rivers, floodplains, and hidden water. In a land defined by drought, water becomes destiny. Across Australia, rivers do not behave as they do elsewhere. They do not flow steadily from mountains to sea, nor do they follow predictable paths. Instead, they wait. They swell. They vanish. They return again. Australia's river systems are shaped less by elevation and more by climate variability. Rain may fall hundreds of kilometers away, yet determine whether a river flows at all. At the heart of this system lies the Murray-Darling Basin, the largest river network in the country. It drains vast portions of eastern Australia, carrying water from the slopes of the Great Dividing Range into low, open plains. But even here, flow is uncertain. In dry years, rivers shrink into narrow channels, broken into isolated waterholes. In wet years, they spill far beyond their banks, spreading across floodplains that can stretch for kilometers. These floods are not disasters for nature. They are lifelines. When floodwaters arrive, nutrients are deposited across the land. Seeds germinate, fish spawn, birds gather in numbers rarely seen elsewhere. Wetlands burst into life. Billabongs, curved remnants of old river channels, fill with water, becoming nurseries for fish, insects, and amphibians. Pelicans, herons, and spoonbills descend from across the continent, drawn by the sudden abundance. But surface water tells only part of the story. Beneath Australia lies one of the largest underground water systems on Earth, the Great Artesian Basin. This immense reservoir stretches beneath much of the continent, holding water that fell as rain tens of thousands of years ago. Under pressure, it rises naturally through springs and bores, feeding remote ecosystems in places where rivers never reach. For much of Australia's interior, this hidden water makes life possible at all. Yet this balance is delicate. Rivers that depend on irregular rainfall are vulnerable to overuse and mismanagement. Excessive extraction can reduce flow, drying wetlands and severing ancient ecological connections. Dams and irrigation schemes have altered natural flood cycles, often benefiting agriculture, while quietly undermining ecosystems downstream. Climate change compounds these pressures. Longer droughts reduce replenishment. Heavier rainfall increases erosion and sediment loads. Extremes grow sharper, leaving rivers less time to recover between events. Despite this, Australia's freshwater systems remain remarkably resilient. Species here evolved to cope with uncertainty. Fish survive in shrinking pools. Plants lie dormant for years. Entire ecosystems pause, waiting for the next flood. In Australia, water is not constant. It is episodic, and when it arrives, it reshapes the land, not slowly, but all at once. Rivers carve channels, floodplains breathe, and life surges forward, before retreating again into patience. To understand Australia, you must understand its water, not as a steady ebb low, but as a pulse, rare, powerful, and essential. Forests from tropics to temperate. At first glance, Australia appears dominated by dry land. But where water lingers, where rain falls often enough, and soils can support roots, the continent transforms. Forests rise, not one forest type, but many, each shaped by climate, fire, and time. In the far north, near the equator, lies one of the oldest rainforests on Earth. The tropical forests of northern Queensland predate the Amazon. Here, life has persisted continuously for tens of millions of years. Towering trees form dense canopies. Vines, ferns, and mosses fill every available space. Light filters down in fragments, and the air remains warm and heavy with moisture. These forests are living archives. Ancient plant lineages survive here, remnants of Gondwana, unchanged while the rest of the world evolved around them. Move south, and the forests change. Rainfall becomes seasonal. Temperatures fluctuate. Fire begins to shape the land. Across much of Australia, eucalyptus forests dominate. These trees are not accidental. They are specialists. Their leaves contain oils that encourage fire. Their bark sheds to reduce damage. Their seeds are often released only after flames pass through. Fire does not end these forests. It renews them. Low-intensity burns clear undergrowth, recycle nutrients, and allow sunlight to reach the forest floor. In the aftermath, new growth surges upward, fresh and resilient. These ecosystems depend on rhythm, fire that is frequent enough to maintain balance, but not so intense that it overwhelms recovery. In cooler southern regions, another forest emerges, Temperate rainforests thrive in sheltered valleys and mountain slopes, especially in Tasmania and parts of southern Victoria. Here, moss-covered trees grow slowly in damp shade. Rivers wind through deep green corridors. Some trees live for centuries, their growth rings recording quiet stability rather than rapid change. These forests burn rarely. When fire does arrive, it can be devastating. Recovery may take generations. Across the continent, forests act as climate regulators. They store carbon. They stabilize soils. They filter water. They provide shelter for countless species, from insects and birds to mammals that never stray far from cover. But forests in Australia exist under constant pressure. Clearing fragments habitats. Invasive species disrupt balance. Changing fire regimes push ecosystems beyond their limits. Some forests are burning too often. Others are burning too intensely. Both outcomes threaten systems that evolved over millennia. Yet resilience remains. Seeds wait in soil. Roots survive beneath ash. Given time and space, many forests regenerate, quietly reclaiming the land. Australia's forests are not static. They breathe with climate. They respond to fire. They shift, retreat, and advance as conditions change. From steamy tropical canopies to cool southern valleys, these forests reveal a continent capable of remarkable diversity. They are reminders that even on the driest inhabited continent on Earth, life finds ways to grow tall. Creatures found nowhere else. Isolation shapes life in profound ways. For tens of millions of years, Australia drifted alone, separated from other continents by vast oceans, cut off from the evolutionary pathways followed elsewhere on Earth. In that isolation, life took a different route. While placental mammals came to dominate much of the world, Australia became the stronghold of marsupials and monotremes, ancient mammal lineages that survived here long after disappearing elsewhere. Marsupials raise their young in pouches, allowing births to occur early and development to continue externally. This strategy proved highly adaptable, producing creatures suited to forests, deserts, grasslands, and trees. Kangaroos and wallabies evolved powerful hind legs, able to travel long distances efficiently across open landscapes. Koalas specialized almost entirely on eucalyptus leaves, toxic to most animals, yet abundant across the continent. Wombats became expert diggers, reshaping soils and creating shelter used by other species. Even the smallest marsupials evolved to conserve energy, water, and movement. Alongside them exist the monotremes, egg-laying mammals that blur the boundary between reptile and mammal. The platypus hunts underwater using electroreception, detecting prey through subtle electrical signals. The echidna, covered in spines, feeds on ants and termites. Its low-energy lifestyle perfectly suited to poor soils. Reptiles thrive in Australia's heat. Lizards, snakes, and crocodiles occupy niches across deserts, wetlands, and forests. Many are highly specialized, active only during narrow temperature windows. avoiding energy waste in extreme conditions. Bird life is equally distinctive. Large, flightless birds like the emu roam open plains, while parrots and cockatoos fill forests with sound and color. Some species migrate across vast distances within the continent, tracking rainfall rather than seasons. Insects dominate silently. Termites build towering mounds that regulate temperature with precision. Ants shape soil structure and nutrient flow. Pollinators sustain plant communities adapted to isolation. But uniqueness comes at a cost. Many Australian species evolved without large predators. When humans arrived, and later, invasive animals, this balance shifted rapidly. Introduced foxes, cats, and rabbits spread with devastating efficiency, placing enormous pressure on native wildlife. Habitat fragmentation compounds the threat, isolating populations that once moved freely across vast landscapes. Yet survival continues. Some species adapt to human-altered environments. Others retreat into protected refuges. Conservation efforts now focus on controlling invasive species, restoring habitats, and reintroducing animals to areas where they once thrived. Australia's wildlife is not defined by abundance alone, but by originality. These are creatures shaped by patience, by scarcity, by time. They are living evidence that evolution does not follow a single path. On this isolated continent, life wrote its own rules, and continues to do so today. Fire, flood, and survival. In Australia, nature does not simply provide a backdrop. It acts. Fire sweeps across plains. Floodwaters drown entire valleys. Cyclones reshape coastlines. These forces are not interruptions to life here. They are fundamental to it. Fire has shaped Australia for millions of years. Long before humans arrived, lightning ignited grasses and forests, sending flames racing across dry landscapes. Plants that could not tolerate fire disappeared. Those that could, survived and flourished. Many Australian ecosystems are fire-dependent. Eucalypts shed bark to protect their trunks. Some seeds remain sealed until exposed to extreme heat. Others respond to chemicals in smoke, germinating only after a burn clears the ground. Fire resets the land. It removes old growth, returns nutrients to the soil, and opens space for renewal. Animals, too, evolved alongside fire. Some burrow underground. Others flee ahead of the flames. Birds circle burning fronts, hunting insects and small animals forced into the open. But fire demands balance. When burns become too frequent or too intense, ecosystems struggle to recover. Soils erode. Seeds are destroyed. Habitats collapse. Flood is fire's opposite, yet just as powerful. Australia's rivers can remain dry for years, then surge suddenly after heavy rain. Floodwaters spread across floodplains, depositing rich sediments and triggering explosive growth. Fish breed in newly connected waters. Waterbirds arrive from across the continent. Wetlands bloom, then fade again as waters retreat. Floods do not just sustain life, they move it. Nutrients, seeds, and organisms are carried vast distances, connecting ecosystems that may otherwise remain isolated. Along the northern coast, cyclones add another layer of intensity. Warm tropical seas fuel these powerful storms, bringing destructive winds, torrential rain, and storm surges. Mangroves absorb some of the impact, their tangled roots stabilizing coastlines and reducing erosion. Yet even mangroves have limits. As oceans warm and sea levels rise, storm damage increases, placing coastal ecosystems under growing stress. Survival in Australia depends on flexibility. Plants grow quickly when conditions allow. Animals breed opportunistically. Entire populations expand and contract in response to weather, rather than fixed seasonal cycles. This adaptability has allowed life to persist through ice ages, droughts, and shifting climates. But change is accelerating. Rising temperatures intensify fires. Heavier rains increase flood damage. The natural rhythm that once allowed recovery is becoming harder to maintain. Still, resilience remains embedded in the land. After fire, green shoots emerge from blackened soil. After floods, life gathers where water lingers. Recovery may be slow, but it continues. Australia's landscapes do not resist extremes. They are shaped by them. Fire clears. Flood renews. Storms reara. NGE. And life, adapted to instability, endures. The living sea, coasts and the Great Barrier Reef. Where the land of Australia ends, another world begins. A world in constant motion, shaped by tides, currents, and temperature, as dynamic and complex as the continent itself. Australia's coastline stretches for more than 30,000 kilometers, touching tropical, temperate, and subantarctic waters. Along this edge, land and sea interact endlessly, creating ecosystems among the most productive on Earth. In the north, warm waters nurture coral reefs, mangroves, and seagrass meadows. Mangroves line sheltered coasts and river mouths, their tangled roots trapping sediment and softening storm surges. They are nurseries, protecting young fish, crustaceans, and birds during the most vulnerable stages of life. Beyond them lie seagrass plains, quiet underwater fields that stabilize the seabed and feed turtles, dugongs, and countless invertebrates. Further offshore, the Great Barrier Reef stretches along the northeastern coast, the largest living structure on the planet. Built by billions of tiny coral animals, the reef is not a single entity, but a vast network of reefs, channels, and islands, each shaped by depth, light, and water temperature. Here, biodiversity reaches extraordinary levels. Fish flash through coral gardens. Sharks patrol reef edges. Whales migrate along ancient routes, passing close to shore on their seasonal journeys. The reef protects the coastline itself, absorbing wave energy and reducing erosion during storms. It is both a living ecosystem and a natural shield. Southward, the coast changes character. Rocky headlands give way to long beaches. Cliffs plunge into cold, nutrient-rich seas, and powerful ocean currents drive productivity. These southern waters support kelp forests, underwater equivalents of terrestrial forests, providing shelter and food for fish, seals, and invertebrates. Upwellings bring nutrients from the deep, fueling plankton blooms that form the foundation of marine food webs. Yet Australia's oceans are among the most vulnerable environments on the continent. Marine heat waves stress coral, leading to widespread bleaching. Rising sea levels threaten mangroves and coastal wetlands. Acidifying oceans weaken coral skeletons and disrupt shell-forming species. Pollution and overfishing add further pressure, breaking links in ecosystems that evolved over millennia. Despite this, resilience remains. Some reefs recover. Mangroves migrate inland where space allows. Marine reserves offer protection, giving ecosystems room to adapt. Australia's seas are not separate from its land. Rivers carry nutrients and damage from inland. Storms born over oceans shape coastlines. Climate links desert, forest, and reef into a single system. To understand Australia fully, you must follow its waters to the edge and beyond, because this continent does not end at the shore. It extends into the sea. Alive with movement, connection, and change. The first custodians, humans and nature. Long before modern borders, long before maps or written records, people lived within the landscapes of Australia for more than 60,000 years. Indigenous Australians have maintained one of the longest continuous relationships between humans and land anywhere on Earth. This relationship was not based on ownership. It was based on responsibility. The land was not something to be controlled, but something to be understood, respected, and cared for. Knowledge of country was passed through stories, songs, and ceremony. Complex systems that encoded geography, seasons, water sources, and survival strategies. These were not myths. They were maps. Songlines traced paths across deserts, mountains, and rivers, guiding people through landscapes where survival depended on precise knowledge. Every feature, a rock formation, a waterhole, a tree, held meaning. Fire was one of the most important tools. Used carefully, it shaped ecosystems long before modern land management existed. Low-intensity burns cleared undergrowth, encouraged fresh growth, and reduced the risk of catastrophic fires. Animals followed new vegetation. Plants regenerated. The land remained productive without being exhausted. This was not accidental. It was refined over thousands of generations. When Europeans arrived, this balance was disrupted. Traditional land management was suppressed or ignored. Farming practices unfamiliar to Australian soils were introduced. Rivers were dammed. Forests cleared. Invasive species spread rapidly across fragile ecosystems. The consequences unfolded slowly. Then, suddenly, soils degraded. Water systems faltered. Fire regimes shifted from renewal to destruction. Yet the knowledge never disappeared. Today, Indigenous-led conservation is re-emerging across the continent. Rangers manage vast protected areas using traditional techniques combined with modern science. Cultural burning is once again recognized for its effectiveness. Land and sea country are being cared for as living systems, not isolated resources. National parks now protect many of Australia's most iconic landscapes, from deserts and rainforests to alpine regions and coral seas. But protection alone is not enough. The future of Australia's nature depends on understanding how deeply human actions shape outcomes. Climate change intensifies every challenge. Fires burn hotter, floods grow stronger, reefs struggle to recover. Yet within this uncertainty lies an opportunity, a chance to listen, to learn from the longest-running environmental managers on Earth, to combine ancient knowledge with modern tools. Australia's story is not only one of extremes and survival. It is a story of connection, between land and water, between fire and renewal, between people and place. To understand this continent fully, you must see it not as untouched wilderness, but as a living landscape, shaped by nature, guided by people, and still evolving. This is Australia, ancient, resilient, and inseparable from those who have cared for it since the very beginning. Nature under pressure. For most of its history, the landscapes of Australia were shaped by slow forces, climate cycles, fire, flood, and time. But pressure has a different rhythm. It accelerates change. Across the continent, natural systems that evolved over millions of years are now being pushed to adapt within decades. One of the greatest pressures is habitat loss. Clearing for agriculture, mining, and urban expansion has fragmented ecosystems that once stretched unbroken for hundreds of kilometers. Forests become islands. Wetlands shrink. Wildlife corridors disappear. For species adapted to wide-ranging movement, isolation can be fatal. Populations decline not because landscapes vanish entirely, but because they are broken apart. Invasive species add another layer of strain. Animals introduced only a few centuries ago, rabbits, foxes, cats, pigs, camels, have spread across environments that native species were never adapted to defend. Predation increases. Vegetation is stripped. Soils erode. Entire food webs are disrupted. Water systems are under pressure as well. Rivers that once flooded naturally are now regulated, diverted, and extracted. Wetlands dry out more frequently. Salinity rises in soils. Ancient river systems struggle to maintain the cycles that once sustained fish, birds, and floodplain forests. Nowhere is pressure more visible than along the coast. Rising ocean temperatures have triggered widespread coral bleaching. Across the Great Barrier Reef, corals expel the algae they depend on, turning white under stress. Some recover, many do not. Marine heat waves are becoming more frequent, leaving reefs less time to heal between events. On land, fire regimes are shifting. Fires are burning hotter and faster. often outside the natural seasons ecosystems evolved to handle. Some forests regenerate, others do not. Repeated intense fires can transform forests into shrublands, or leave landscapes vulnerable to erosion and invasion. Climate change amplifies every pressure. Heat waves grow longer, droughts deepen, rainfall arrives in destructive bursts rather than steady replenishment. The natural variability Australia is known for is becoming sharper, less forgiving. Yet pressure does not tell the whole story. Across the continent, efforts are underway to protect and restore what remains. National parks expand, marine reserves grow. Indigenous land management returns fire to its rightful role as a tool of care, not catastrophe. Species once pushed to the edge are being reintroduced to protected areas. Feral predators are controlled in targeted regions. Habitats are slowly reconnected. Australia's nature is not fragile because it is weak. It is vulnerable because it is specialized. Life here evolved for extremes, but not for speed. The question now is not whether Australia's ecosystems can survive. It is whether they are given the time, space, and respect they need to do so. Under pressure, the land is changing. What remains uncertain is how much will endure and what future generations will inherit. The future of Australia's wild places. The future of Australia is not written in stone. It is still being shaped by choices, by knowledge, and by time. Across the continent, there are signs of loss, but also of renewal. Protected areas now cover vast regions of land and sea. National parks safeguard deserts, rainforests, mountains, and reefs, creating refuges where ecosystems can recover without constant pressure. In these spaces, nature is given something rare: time. Indigenous-led land management is playing an increasingly vital role. Traditional fire practices are being reintroduced, reducing fuel loads and restoring natural fire cycles. Rangers care for country using techniques refined over tens of thousands of years, combining cultural knowledge with modern science. The land responds. Vegetation returns. Wildlife stabilizes. Fire becomes a tool of renewal once again, not destruction. In some regions, rewilding projects are restoring animals lost from large parts of the continent. Species are reintroduced into fenced reserves and predator-controlled landscapes, allowing ancient ecological roles to be fulfilled once more. On the coast, marine reserves protect breeding grounds and migration routes. Fishing pressure is reduced. Seagrass meadows regenerate. Some coral reefs, given respite from repeated stress, begin to recover. These efforts do not erase damage already done, but they demonstrate something important. Australia's ecosystems still have resilience left within them. The challenge ahead is scale. Climate change will continue to test every system, from alpine snowfields to coral seas. Adaptation will be unavoidable. Some landscapes will change permanently. The question is not whether change will occur, but how it is guided. Future conservation will depend on connectivity. linking fragmented habitats so species can move as conditions shift. It will depend on listening to science, to experience, and to the oldest environmental knowledge on Earth. Australia has never been a land of certainty. Its history is one of fluctuation, adaptation, and endurance. If given room, its landscapes can continue that tradition. The deserts will bloom again after rain. Forests will regrow after fire. Rivers will flow when conditions allow. Reefs will persist where stress is eased. The future of Australia's wild places is not guaranteed, but it is possible. And like the continent itself, it will belong not to those who try to dominate the land, but to those who learn to live within its limits. A continent remembered. Australia is not a land that reveals itself quickly. It speaks in long cycles, through fire and flood, through ancient stone and living sea, through landscapes shaped not by force, but by time. From the red heart of the outback, to rainforests older than memory, from alpine peaks to coral reefs alive with color, this continent reminds us that nature is not static. It adapts, it waits, it endures. Australia's story is one of resilience, but also responsibility, because the future of these wild places depends not only on natural forces, but on human choices. How we protect, how we manage, how we listen. If you've enjoyed this journey across one of Earth's most extraordinary landscapes, please like the video. It really helps support the channel. And subscribe to Apex Atlas for more in-depth documentaries exploring the nature, geography, and stories of countries around the world. New journeys are already waiting. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next destination.